Welcome, viewers and listeners. You are tuning into Globespan 24/7, owned by Mr. Nohar Singh, with technical operator Mr. Devin Bisoon. I am your host and moderator, Vishnu Bisram. This evening, we have the honor of a most distinguished gentleman, the Attorney General of Guyana, a member of Parliament for at least 15 years. He is a senior counsel, a distinguished gentleman indeed, very well known throughout the Guyanese diaspora, throughout the Caribbean diaspora. He has been a household name over the last, we should say, 3 or 4 years as a result of legal matters that he has pursued within Guyana, as well as in appeals at the CCJ in Trinidad. I want to welcome Mr. Anil Nandlall, Senior Counsel. Mr. Nandlall, welcome, sir, this evening. We are very, very honored to have you join us. And firstly, let me thank you for taking your time off to appear on our TV program, Globespan 24/7. This evening, we would like to focus on the state of the Attorney General's office, and also if we can talk about some issues pertaining to legal affairs in Guyana, as well as international law. I'm sure you are, in fact, I've heard you and you're quite eloquent in explaining some legal matters as it pertains to Guyana's border controversy with Venezuela. So firstly, Mr. Nandlall, would you like any opening comments?
Well, I would like first to thank you very much and to thank Mr. Nohar Singh for inviting me to be on this program. It is always a pleasure to share the platform on Globespan with any of its distinguished hosts. And of course, you rank Vishnu among the most distinguished of all the hosts. I want to also thank you very much for your very generous introductory remarks, and I want to take this opportunity to say good evening to all your viewers right across Guyana, because this program is widely viewed in Guyana and across the Caribbean as well, but also obviously in New York, in Canada, and in the diaspora located right across the globe. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to begin right away. When you assumed office, I think it was around August 2nd, if I'm not mistaken, there were some issues about your gaining entrance into the Attorney General's chambers. Could you give us a little background what really happened there and how you were able to get access to the office?
Well, you would recall that myself, His Excellency President Dr. Irfan Ali, Dr. Bharat Jagdeo, and Gail Teixeira were sworn in at the same time at the Arthur Chung Convention Center on the afternoon of August the 2nd, 2020. Later that day, there was a meeting between representatives of our new government and the outgoing government at the office of the president, where discussions were held to ensure a smooth transition of office and a smooth taking over of the assets of the ministry, the paperwork of the ministries and vehicles, etc. And obviously for some civilized manner of handing over of physical possession of the premises themselves. We were told by His Excellency President Irfan Ali that we should stay away for two days, because that was the time requested to complete this transition process. So we complied and I stayed away for 2 days. I did not visit the Ministry of Legal Affairs and the Attorney General Chambers in compliance with those instructions. And I eventually went there on the third day. On the third day, I was told when I went into the ministry, I was allowed to enter. I was welcomed by the regular staff. And when I proceeded to the office of the Attorney General, I was informed that it was locked and there was some inability to provide me with a sensible reason in relation to where the keys were at the time. I nevertheless instructed the PS to go and find the key wherever it was. I was told at that point in time that it was in the possession of the outgoing Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, my colleague, Mr. Basil Williams. So I instructed the PS to call Mr. Williams and ensure that we have the keys for the following day. So I returned about 11 o'clock in the morning of the following day, and the door was still locked. And when contact was made, apparently, with Mr. Williams, he said he didn't have anything sensible to say. And we were now nearly completing the week, and I have been unable to go into my office, although all my colleague ministers were already in office. And then I believe the next day, I went to the office again, and the office was still locked. And I immediately called a carpenter and I sent for a squad from the Guyana Police Force, and I instructed the carpenter to break the door open. And that is how I gained entry into the office. Subsequently, after the door was broken, the key or the keys magically appeared. But I ensured that the police was there and they took an inventory of what I met in the office when I entered the office. And that inventory, I suppose, is still with the ministry or the police. So it was a kind of an eventful start as I began the sojourn as Attorney General. So that's the incident I believe that you're referring to.
Yes, that's correct, and that was quite a welcoming reception. I'm sure people would have found that quite amusing.
It made the news because I remembered some front page story about it in the newspapers.
And so, since we are speaking of the state of affairs of the Attorney General office, how has things progressed over the last 5 months?
Well, we have to begin, I think, to speak about what I inherited, and then I can proceed to speak about what have been done since. If you recall,
I mean, in terms of what you inherited, were you able to have access to computers and equipments and so forth?
Yes. The office was properly equipped, and I can't lodge any complaint in that regard. But I was speaking about the work that was actually done. Vishnu, if you recall, and if your readers recall, Bishop Edgil, in his presentation of the budget speech of 2020, speaking about the Attorney General office, he said that the Attorney General office was dormant. And he outlined, because I assisted in the preparation of that presentation. If you look at the legislative agenda of the Attorney General office, because a large part of the Attorney General's functions relates to the crafting of a legislative agenda and the pushing of our legislative agenda for the country, for the government, for the entire government, all the ministers, is the Attorney General who is the driving force behind that endeavor of taking bills to the National Assembly to enact. And if you examine the period from 2015 to 2020 against any other period in Guyana's contemporary history, you will ineluctably conclude that it was the most dormant period in terms of a legislative agenda. Compare it, for example, with our agenda of 2006 to 2011, when we passed nearly 300 pieces of legislation. 300 pieces of legislation, and I speak of substantive legislation. From 2015 to 2020, all that was done, let me list it on my fingers. One, that all the outstanding AML CFT bills, which they used their one-seat majority to vote down between 2011 to 2015, they then picked up and simply presented it in the National Assembly. So they didn't draft any. They were all bills that were there, that they voted on, that they caused us to get blacklisted and grey-listed and sanctioned on the universal stage at the level of the Caribbean Action Task Force and the Financial Task Force of the World. We were sanctioned there, and we were labeled internationally as a delinquent and a non-compliant AML CFT regime country. And that had a whole set of negative repercussions that flowed from it.
Just to clarify, that particular legislation is the anti-money laundering legislation.
Yes, the anti-money laundering, countering the financing of terrorism legislation. So all that they voted down, he just brought it back. So that accounted for over 50% of what they did, of the legislative agenda. Then they brought a commission bill, a petroleum commission bill, that they themselves admitted when they heard the debate from the floor that it was technically deficient, and their Minister of Natural Resources, Mr. Raphael Trotman, requested that it be sent to a select committee. It never saw the light of day after that. The committee never met. All right? So that one gone. Then they brought a law reform commission bill. That one was enacted. And I remember that we were critical of it because they concentrated all the powers in that bill of appointment, powers of appointment to the commission. They resided those powers with the president and the minister without consulting anyone else. So Mr. Granger, president, and Mr. Williams, attorney general, are appointing members to a law reform commission. Now, Mr. Granger, he was a serial violator of the law, and Mr. Basil Williams was grappling to understand the law. And the two of them together took for themselves all the power to appoint a law reform commission. Understandably, they got it wrong because there was no consultation. They didn't put in the law that they must consult with the judiciary, with the legal profession, with the private sector, with the labor movement, with the religious community, etc. A law reform commission, by its very nature, must be broad-based. This is an apolitical entity. So what two politicians appointing everybody there without any consultation? Then the other thing that was flawed about it was that they only had legally trained people on the commission. The law only allowed for the appointment of judges, former judges, and lawyers. Now that is the most myopic and flawed understanding of what a law reform commission encompasses and embraces and represents. So that was it's better they didn't pass anything. Because what ended up happening, they never appointed anyone to the commission, but the commission was there for 3 years, only with clerical staff, and blow out over $100 million in taxpayers' money to pay those staff and to rent a building at 4,000 and more US dollars per month, but never had a commissioner appointed. So they passed that. They also made an amendment to the Coroners Act to permit the appointment of more coroners to do inquests. Remember, they conveyed this impression that Guyana was some slaughterhouse under the PPP, and Mr. Granger, as usual, keeps making these unrealistic promises that he will hold investigations into the tens of thousands of Guyanese who were murdered extrajudicially. You remember those fanciful jargonism and cheap propaganda that they used to spill, that a lot of people ended up believing and voted for them? Well, they amended the law to hold the inquests for the tens of thousands of people that they said were murdered. And you know what? Not a single inquest was ever held. Not a single coroner was ever appointed under the new amendment. Then they had a series of legislation that followed every budget. And what do you think those legislations were for? To increase taxes against the Guyanese people right across the spectrum of economic life and social life in the country. Because you know you can only impose tax by law. So they had a series of legislation, 30, 40 legislation, every budget time. They have a one-liner only. Like VAT is now to be imposed, and they put a whole list of things that they put VAT on. And then you have licenses. They increased every license fees ever known. I learned about some license that I never knew existed. You know, they still have on the law books a license for a mule cart. The people have increased that. There's no mule in the country, but they increased license for mules. You understand? You know the guy who blows the horn and sells fish in the village?
Correct.
He apparently is supposed to be granted a license. They increased that license. You remember on the quarantine course, there was a tapir that announces that announcement?
That's correct, yes.
They drop a tax for he too. He had to pay, I don't know how much tax before he could do the announcements. So, I mean, I'm giving you the ridiculous, but imagine the ordinary, like driver's license, passports, birth certificates, death certificates, gun license, shop license, hotel license, bar license, all of that. By hundreds of percentage, you know, they increased it. Not at 10% and at 20%. So while they're increasing these humongous, they're placing these humongous increases on license, at the same time, they are imposing an equal number of onerous and oppressive series of tax measures on the population. So the Guyanese getting licks from every side possible. And there is no commensurate increase in wages and salaries. So you become poorer and poorer and poorer. And it became progressively worse every year because the productive sectors began to decline, export naturally decreased, import decreased because the population lost disposable power significantly, so they can't spend. So customs revenue dropped because less importation, the people can't buy. Why are you going to bring goods into the country? The cumulative effect of all of that made every Guyanese poorer every day and every year. So I am trying to think what other legislation of merit that they imposed. Oh, the SARA, the infamous SARA bill. Remember, they told the world that millions of billions of dollars of state property was stolen and they want to get it back. So they passed a bill They did consultation. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry Lal told them that this bill got pungent unconstitutional components to it. Christopher Ram told them that. The Bar Association told them that. The private sector told them that after receiving legal advice. The Barbies Bar told them that. The labor movement told them that. The religious organization was up in arms. Because this bill sought to make criminal that which is not criminal and sought to make wrong things that were not wrong, and they made the bill operate retrospectively. Let me give an example. So the bill was promulgated in 2016, I think. So a law, when it is passed, it takes effect progressively.
At that time, that's correct.
That time going forward. Well,
correct.
This bill went backward. So if you purchased a car from the government in 2014 and you did nothing wrong, you complied with all the extant procedures that were valid and subsisting, governing that transaction in 2014, this bill now imposes some new requirements under which such a transaction should have been conducted, and it makes this bill operable to that transaction.
Now, in several countries, that would be unconstitutional.
In any civilized country, that would be unconstitutional. It is repugnant to common sense. It violates one's sense of justice. So, but they went ahead, despite all the objections, and they imposed that. In the bill itself, they said that the parliament will appoint the director and the deputy director. Yet they appointed, obviously the president, in violation of the law, appointed Clive Thomas and a man named Rattimeyer in those two positions. So when they went to court, remember the charge Bihari? Imagine they charge, or they sued to recover a bank. The people bought land from the government for several $1 million at valuation price 15 years ago. Build the headquarters of Guyana's largest bank. The land was used to construct the headquarters of Guyana's largest bank.
Correct.
The headquarters of Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry. The people spent over 1 point something billion to build that 15 years after a government coming in an attempt to try to take that away. Do you understand the level of insanity that we are dealing with here? What signal, first of all, are you sending to your population that you are going to seize private property using this bill? What message are you sending to your commercial entities, your private sector that is so vital for your growth? What message, most importantly, are you sending to investors whom you're hoping to woo to your country as an attractive destination? And if that is not all, they started a policy of using SOCU and SARA and the GRA to terrorize the business community. And they used to boast about it. Clive Thomas was on national television saying that SARA will investigate every person who owns a building more than 4-story high. So we were reverting back to low G's. Remember, the low G's was 1 story. According to Thomas, if you go 4-story, he will come and investigate you. These people were insane. When you reflect upon it, there was a level of insanity that was manifest in their utterances and their policies. So I believe I have accounted fairly for their legislative agenda. I can't recall offhand any other legislation of substance that they passed. And by the way, every court, every proceedings that they have filed utilizing the SARA legislation was struck down by the court, was dismissed, including the one filed against GBTI. The other one that they passed was one that sought to circumscribe broadcasting in the country and the way television operated. They increased the license fees.
They did.
From a few $1,000s to the millions.
Mm-hmm.
They took away people's spectrum and give them their own spectrum. And they made it mandatory for every television and radio operator to carry, free of cost, public advertisements that they determine how many hours per week and all sorts of things. Every piece of legislation that they passed had an authoritarian, repressive undercurrent. The policy was one that was dictatorial. So they passed a law as well to allow GRA to go into people's bank accounts without informing the persons. They passed a law against persons who owe VAT to be blacklisted in the airport once the Commissioner General issues such a direction. Now, the way VAT operates as a tax, a person will always owe VAT because you have VAT is done on a continuous basis and there are periodic intervals that you must pay in your VAT return, the VAT that you collect.
Mm-hmm.
You have some time. So if the law says, I think it's every quarterly, you have to throw in, or every monthly, every month you have to take back to GRA the VAT you have collected for them. So if I am leaving the country on the 15th of the month and we have a malicious GRA head and he checked the record, I will owe VAT, I will owe GRA VAT. The time has not come yet for me to pay though, but on the record, technically, I owe the VAT. So the man can stop me from leaving the country. Those were the kind of invasive and, as I keep saying, oppressive measures and powers that they resided in the state and in the government against the ordinary Guyanese people. So the laws that they pass, we will have at some point in time and very shortly review all of them and repeal them.
Well, that was going to be my next question. That these laws were passed and they were supposed to have netted billions of dollars. Saru and Soku were supposed to have netted billions. Did they net any? Do you know?
I have made public SARA's accounts. SARA has recovered not $1 in revenue, but has expended in excess of $1 billion of taxpayers' money simply as expenses, current expenses. So they rented a building. Now, for your viewers who are looking at me in America, $1 billion Guyana dollars is over 5 million US, right? They rented a building for over 4 years or 5 years for $10,100 US per month. Yeah, a huge building. They had electrified that building, Wi-Fi, furnish it with all sorts of fancy equipment and boardroom and furniture, a whole fleet of motor vehicles so that the kings and the queens can drive around. And then salaries. I was going through the staff list. Do you know that Takoma Ogonseye was employed as a forensic investigator? You know this gentleman?
Yes, I'm familiar with the name, yes.
And another one, the one who is on the Elections Commission now. What is his name?
Yes.
His job description at SARA was an investigative auditor. You think these people are okay? And if you see the money that they're working. So SARA was a national parasite that parasited of the country, $1 billion, and did not deliver a single output, not one. In fact, it cost the state more with the frivolous and terrible lawsuits that they filed.
And just as a side point, they claimed they didn't have any money to keep Gaisuku functioning, these 4 estates that they closed, but they had $1 billion for that, and I'm sure there would have been wasteful expenditures in other offices having to do with the Attorney General's office as well. I'll come back to that. So you said that you are going to look at these legislation that were passed, and there is going to be amendments, or?
Well, some of them we will have to repeal completely. In fact, one will be taken to the Parliament that very shortly. That will be, well, we were going to repeal it, but we are going to severely amend it. And that will be on the order paper soon. So that the process has begun. We have to dismantle all these fanciful legislative architectures of an oppressive genus that they have imposed upon the Guyanese people.
I like your choice of words, and in fact, it just dawned on me that I had done a survey just after a few months after the 100 days of office, and people everywhere I traveled and interviewers I used said you're quite articulate, and I can understand what it is they were saying as I listened to you expound this evening, and in other programs I watch you in Trinidad as well, and in other Globespan programs as well. But Mr. Attorney General, sir, I wanted to ask you if you could explain to us, because I had read in the media of huge sums of money that were expended through your office under the previous administration, some of which we thought would be considered as highly illegal. Some were for political issues, political matters, political victimization, and so forth. Can you clarify?
Well, when I left the ministry, the last auditor report, and you see, we are
talking about 2015 now.
Yes.
Yes.
In 2014, note.
Yeah.
In 2014, and in the 5 years preceding 2014, that's from 2010, 2009 to 2014, the Auditor General, in his special audit report, reported that the Attorney General office spent $1 million annually as an average to retain private counsel, external counsel, sorry. I want your viewers to digest that information. And they can go and check this special audit done by the Auditor General. For the 5 years prior to 2015, an average of $1 million was expended by the AG office for the retention of lawyers external to the office. From 2016 to 2020, the AG spent $170 million to pay lawyers outside the ministry. So from $1 million per year in 5 years, from $5 million over 5 years, and this 5 years, when you compare the two, you have $5 million on one side and $170 million on the other side. And these are facts that can be verified. So that's the first thing. Secondly, he had a fully staffed ministry. He had Solicitor General, Deputy Solicitor General, Assistant Solicitor General, another Assistant Solicitor General, and a complement of State Counsel. Despite all of that, then apparently the president had felt sorry for him one time and gave him 3 advisors. Remember? He had 3 advisors, Claudette Singh being one, I think. One from the Duke Pollard, another one.
That's correct.
And I believe the other one is the same GCOM guy, Patterson.
Yes, he was on the payroll. Yes, correct.
Yes. So, and that is not counted yet. I don't know where those figures are. I'm going to check for them. So, in addition to the full complement of staff and 3 advisors, this guy still had to spend 170 million. And you know, the man had the audacity the other day, I saw it reflected somewhere in the news, to say that he did nothing wrong. Well, if the man has no appreciation of what is right and wrong, and I wouldn't reply to that. Let the ordinary guy judge whether he did something wrong or he did something right. Because if you can make such a statement, it means that you lack an appreciation of a difference between what is right and what is wrong. And then what is worse is when you examine some of those payments, a lot of it had to do with the politically related litigation. And the avalanche of spending started with the no confidence motion and the challenge against the appointment of the GCOM chair. That's where the baby party started. The money train started then. And it never stopped. Now, remember there was a man by the name of Compton Reed. Compton Reed. This was a man who was described in his affidavit as a farmer from New Amsterdam who filed a challenge against the no confidence motion. This farmer from New Amsterdam, however, had the capacity to hire 2 of the more eminent senior counsel in the country and a battery of juniors. When you check the accounting records of the ministry, these lawyers were paid $20-something million. This man, Reed, you know who he sued? It was the Attorney General. So the Attorney General pays lawyers
to be sued,
to represent a private party who sued the Attorney General. And you have all these lawyers from the Caribbean that they brought. I don't know which country they brought them from. None of them, you saw them. They were unable to help them in their quest because they lost every case, almost. Well, every case. I can't remember them winning any of the politically related case. They lost the GCOM commissioner case. They lost the no confidence motion case. They lost the registration case. They lost the Felix and Scott case. They lost everything. And the 5 months, they lost the Holladar case. They lost the Reed case. They lost the Messenger Jones case. They lost the Yolita Moore case. And you know what? Those 5 months, as I keep saying, we can't find the invoices. So the Holladar matter, the Reed matter, not the Reed, there was another lady who filed. Or Yolita Moore, Messenger Jones, and there was another person. I can't remember.
There was another woman. I forgot the name myself.
Yes, another woman. She's a paper lady in Sapphire. I know her. She sells newspaper. But she afforded lawyers from all over the Caribbean. Right? And she's a paper vendor.
Selling newspaper has a lot of money.
Apparently. And these lawyers were all, the invoices can be found. That's for 2020. What the Auditor General spoke there about was only for the year 2019. The 2020 audited books will come out in 2021. But as I said, I've been unable to find where these invoices are to have paid this multiplicity and constellation of lawyers that provided this battery, that really provided no voltage in the litigation. And I know that many of your viewers are wondering, what am I going to do about it?
That's correct. And that would be my next question to you,
I
sir.
know.
So since we are discussing the state of affairs, what is going to be done about that?
Well, the government has a duty to accept the recommendation and to act upon the recommendation of the Auditor General. And the Auditor General says, invite the police to do a probe. So it will be passed to the police for their investigation.
And that has not been done as yet.
That has not been done as yet. It will be done very shortly, though.
But there are also some outstanding payments to be made. I think you made those comments in the paper. Are you going to still proceed with the payments?
Well, in addition, I'm not inclined. I don't think that the government would be paying for the political cases any outstanding bills. But there are other cases that he farmed out of a non-political nature to other lawyers. And, it's a contract that one has to honor. So those cases have been paid. And we have paid out several millions for 2020. And also, in violation of the Constitution, he hired a battery of prosecutors too. He has no authority in law to hire prosecutors. Prosecution is a responsibility which the Constitution exclusively resides with the Director of Public Prosecutions. In fact, it is a usurpation of the functions of that office for the Attorney General to hire prosecutors. The man hired a whole host of prosecutors, paying them a $2 million down payment, retainer, and $20,000 per hour.
Wow.
When they appear in court. Now all those people are suing the current Attorney General. And these are the guys who prosecuted me. And prosecuted the President. And prosecuted Irfan Ali. And prosecuted Ashley Singh. And not one single conviction were they able to yield. Dharamlal was before the court. Siraj was before the court. You know all the people. Every single case was successful.
And if you could just clarify for us, from over the last 5 months, you have discontinued all of these practices in terms of an update of the state of affairs of the AG's office.
Certainly the AG office cannot violate the Constitution by retaining private lawyers to prosecute. That can be a function. It's not a function of the AG. But of course, those things are not going to be tolerated at all.
Would anyone be held accountable? Is it possible? Is it practical? I know in Trinidad, for example, a former Attorney General had talked about having public prosecution or private prosecution of individuals who violated the law.
Well, the matter has to be investigated by the police. We don't give the police directions. And wherever those investigations go, the state has a responsibility to charge and prosecute. These are wrongs against the state. Civil proceedings will also be filed where necessary to recover sums of money that have been misspent, ill-spent, and squandered unlawfully.
All right, so Mr. Attorney General Anil Nandlall, Senior Counsel, we are about to go on a short break. And when we come back, I'd like to discuss or if you could give us an update about international law, the controversy with Venezuela over this matter that's before the International Court of Justice. So we're going to go on a break now, and we'll be right back. So please
All from
stay
One
tuned.
Supplier is pleased to announce its online shipping for West Indian and American groceries. Order online at allfromonesupplier.com and with free shipping and deliveries to any part of the United States. Save time and energy to shop for all of your West Indian groceries from the safety of your home or office. We carry West Indian products like curry powders, meats and fish, dashing bush, pepper sauce, sodas, and your favorite snacks. All from One Supplier has it all. All from One Supplier fulfills and ships your order directly to you. So visit All from One Supplier today to start shopping, or call All from One Supplier at 718-551-3292 to handle all of your West Indian grocery needs. That's All from One Supplier, 718-551-3292. Free shipping, free deliveries, or curbside pickup from allfromonesupplier.com.
Hi, it's Richard David. I'm your district leader here in Richmond Hill and in South Ozone Park, where we have the highest COVID rate in New York City. It's between 15 and 20%. This is the time to limit gatherings with your family, to stop going to house parties so that we can get this positive rate and the number of people infected back down. The hospital is full. The funeral home is reporting more people there than before. Work with us to save lives in this new year.
TravelSpan has low fares on American Airlines, Eastern Airlines, Caribbean Airlines, and JetBlue. Let TravelSpan shop and compare prices for all 4 airlines. Guyanese now have choices, so book your preferred airline through TravelSpan. Call TravelSpan at 718-845-0437 for the lowest deals between New York, Miami, and Guyana. That's TravelSpan at 718-845-0437. From Miami to Guyana, rates are as low as $186 one-way and $417 round trip. Deals from New York to Guyana are as low as $191 one-way and $475 round trip. And TravelSpan is also offering shop and ship. So if you cannot travel, you shop and TravelSpan will ship all your items for you. So call TravelSpan today in New York at 718-845-0437. In Georgetown, 227-1701. In Berbice, 337-4287. And in the West Coast Demerara, 269-0140. TravelSpan has several offices to serve all your needs. So call TravelSpan today.
Welcome back, viewers, listeners. I am your host, Vishnu Bisram, and you're listening to Globespan 24/7 program, owned by Mr. Nohar Singh, technical operator, Mr. Devin Bissoon. We have as our guest this evening, the very distinguished Attorney General of Guyana, Member of Parliament for 15 years, a Senior Counsel, Mr. Anil Nandlall. Mr. Senior Counsel, sir, I traveled around Guyana and in the diaspora quite a lot. And when I say traveled, I mean traveled throughout the Guyanese diaspora, whether it's in Canada, the US, St. Lucia, Trinidad, and other countries. And everywhere I went, sir, people were saying that an injustice was committed when you were not conferred senior counsel years ago. I mean, everyone felt you were truly deserving of the several individuals who were appointed or conferred senior counsel status. Can you give a little background? What is senior counsel? How does one become a senior counsel? I mean, I know, but for the benefit of the audience, and then we will resume with some other questions having to do with the legislative agenda as well as international law.
The honor and distinction of being conferred with silk is a long-standing tradition dating back centuries. And it used to be the king's lawyer. And over the years, so the Attorney General of every country, for example, ought ex officio to be senior counsel, if not appointed. In fact, they should be appointed just formally, because the Attorney General, of course, is Her Majesty's legal advisor under the British system. And when Her Majesty was replaced with a head of state after colonialism, that person became, when you had a Governor General, it used to be Her Majesty's legal advisor to the Governor General. And then, the process evolved that way. So, but it expanded beyond that, and it was an honor that was conferred, or that is conferred, on lawyers who would have distinguished themselves at the bar in presenting cases of a particular quality, offering legal assistance to the court of a certain level of distinction, and who would have commanded the respect of their peers and society. In other words, by your sheer work and accomplishment, you would have been regarded by the larger society as an authority in the profession, on the law. And those are the hallmarks that qualify one for the conferment of silk. Unfortunately, in Guyana, this process has been tainted, and one can argue that it departed from meritocracy and was contaminated by extraneous and irrelevant considerations of a political type in some instances. And I hope that we have moved away, and we will move away from that unholy tradition, or aberration, I prefer to say. Aberration, not tradition.
Operation, yes.
And we can restore the process to its original and traditional method of selection and appointment of silk.
Based on meritocracy.
Based on meritocracy and the outstanding criteria.
And if I may interrupt you, I think one of the criteria, if I'm not mistaken, is your is the number of cases you were cited in the law books, or law reviews rather.
A barometer that one can use is to look at the law reports of the jurisdiction, or in the region in which the jurisdiction is located, because you have regional reports, you have the Commonwealth law reports, you have West Indian reports for West Indian countries, Commonwealth law reports for the entire Commonwealth, you have Eastern Caribbean law reports for the Eastern Caribbean, and as a subset, it can be described as a subset of the West Indian reports. And then each country, or most countries, have individual law reports. So you have the Guyana law reports. And cases, all the cases obviously determined in a territory, can't find themselves in the law reports. There's only, you don't have space. So what the judiciaries of the respective countries do, or alternatively, what the editors of the law reports do, is that they inquire and investigate into the territories, or they ask the head of the judiciary to send to them the cases that would have been significant, decided over a specified period. Significant in the sense that would have had some positive, fundamental impact on the advancement of jurisprudence and law, not necessarily for that jurisdiction, but can have far-reaching ramifications for other jurisdictions with similar legal systems. And so that when your cases, or cases that you have appeared in, find themselves in the reports, that by itself is a hallmark of distinction, because it means that you would have contributed in some significant way in the advancement of the rule of law, of some principle of law, and jurisprudence generally in your country and further afield.
And if I'm not mistaken, sir, because I did a little review into your background, I think your cases were cited the most. I think about 16, 17, the number was, and with I believe you were tied with Llewellyn John or just ahead of Llewellyn John, and way above others who were given silk over the last from under the previous coalition administration, 2015 to 2019.
Well, in the West Indian reports, I had 16 reported cases, which was higher than any of the other appointees over the past 5 years, though I was the youngest of the appointees. So that by itself is an accomplishment, but I don't want to blow my own trumpet on your
Yes, and so that's why I thought we need to put it on the record, though, that you know, when we say distinguished service and senior counsel, I mean, you have truly earned it. People felt that way, and in my own research as well, it would seem to have been justified. If I could ask you now, I mean, going forward, what are some of the legislative agenda of yours or the government in coming year?
Well, our legislative agenda, Vishnu, is largely based upon our manifesto, a document that we hold sacred to, a document that we consider a pact between us and the electorate, because that is the document that we sold to the electorate and upon which the electorate elected us. In that manifesto, we promised at a macro level to transform Guyana over the next 5 years. This year will be our first full year in government, and this year, therefore, our budget ought to lay the foundation upon which that transformational journey will embark. Now, so you will have infrastructural development in a massive way, the highway to Brazil, new roadways, highways across the west coast of Demerara, east coast, the Ogle to Diamond Road, the road continuing to Soesdijk from Diamond. Then you have the Sherry Street, Mandela Avenue that is currently being done. And that's only for road projects. And I'm not talking about all these small roads all over the country. These are the major big ones. And then, of course, you have, I spoke about the Lethem to Linden Road, the De La Conte Highway is still on the books. And then you have massive projects like the Deepwater Harbor in Berbice. And you would have seen, of course, we are now a full-fledged oil-producing country and economy, and we have to prepare for that. That brings with it a whole new vista for economic development altogether. You have already seen some 5 or 6 internationally branded hotels evincing a clear and settled intention to come and establish abode here. And I think about 3 will begin construction this year. We have received a plethora of interests from a wide array of investors scattered across the globe to establish condominiums, townhouses, office complexes, and a whole host of facilities of a kind and of magnitude never seen in Guyana before. We have also to prepare an environmental policy that will protect our environment now, having regard to the fact that we are now oil producing. We have a multifaceted approach to oil production in the sense that we will not use the proceeds of oil in isolation, and oil will not be seen as the panacea of all of our developmental problems. We intend to continue to diversify our economy so that we do not put all of our future in an oil basket, so to speak. We believe that Guyana's true potential and greatest potential lies in the agro sector. I think that's where our strength lies, and that is inexhaustible as opposed to an exhaustible resource like our oil. So we need to build our agriculture base. We need to move agricultural production from primary cottage stage to plantation level with all the byproducts being exploited and explored. That's the kind of movement we want to see in the agro sector, and then move the agro sector into the manufacturing sector where we can produce fresh foods and vegetables. Imagine putting down a factory to do tomato ketchup in Blackbush. Not the coloring kind of thing that you get in America, but real organic tomatoes and pepper sauce and all these fresh vegetables that we have. You can get them, freshly packaged and properly packaged in Guyana. We have a tremendous dairy potential. We can easily feed. The Caribbean has a food bill of about 10 billion US annually. We can provide, if we are able to provide a quarter of that, supply them with a quarter of it, and we can do that. We have potential for dairy, for mutton and everything here. But we need the infrastructure. We need significantly to bring down the cost of production. And the cost of production is largely tied to the cost of energy. Guyana has one of the most prohibitive rates of electricity in the world. If you check your light bill and you check my light bill, I am paying 4 times more than you are paying in New York, although you may be burning more because you are using heat and you are using air condition. One must be on in your house, or else you can't be there. In Guyana, we don't consume that much, but my bill will be 4 times yours because the cost is 4 times more. So we have to bring that down. And once we bring that down, the other sectors of the country will pick up. Now, you asked me a question about what is the legislative agenda. A country, as I like to say, is not governed by men, but by laws. Every one of these sectors now will have to have an accompanying legislative framework and structure upon which it will have to be constructed. We will have to have new zoning laws in relation to lands. We have to have new laws in relation to buildings to permit high-rise buildings. Currently, our law does not permit that. We have to have seriously zoned areas. What is commercial, what is residential, what is manufacturing, that kind of regulatory network has to be established. Then we have, I spoke about the environment, the new environmental laws and regulations. I spoke about the hospitality sector. We have to get new condominium type legislation, townhouse type legislation to ensure that it is consistent with our existing legal structure. Because we have a unique system of land ownership in Guyana. So we have to make those things. We have to pass legislation to make our manufacturing sector, if we are going to food manufacturing, compliant with international standards. You can't export food unless you have certain mechanisms in place and you produce and you manufacture at certain internationally stipulated levels. You have to pass legislation to ensure that the manufacturing is done in compliance with those international standards, or else you cannot export. The oil and gas sector itself requires a complete menu of legislation to regulate it. Local policy, you keep hearing about that a lot. We have to put that in place and put that in place quickly. We have to put in place a legislative mechanism on how we will deal with the oil revenue. How will we regulate it? Where will it be kept? What use will be put to it? Then we have to get legislation dealing with gas to shore, because that's another project that we are pursuing. I spoke about plantation agriculture. We have to get legislation there again, and I can continue into the various areas. But I'm sure that your viewers get a clear picture of the
I,
mammoth
I,
task
what,
that is at hand.
one of the issues raised in traveling around Guyana and in the diaspora as well is constitutional reform, electoral reform. Is there anything on that you would like to amplify on?
Certainly, both in our manifesto, as I said, that is our binding document, that's our guiding document. In the manifesto, it speaks about electoral reforms and it speaks to constitutional reform. And we are committed to that. This year, the process will begin. In terms of electoral reform, I have already assembled a team in the drafting department, and I have instructed that they bring all the pieces of electoral and election legislation together so that we can start the work. I have a fair idea of what has to be done, and I'm seeking assistance and expert guidance in different countries or from different countries, and I will continue to do so. Of course, the constitutional one is one that we spoke about a lot, and we are committed to it. But as we often said, it's going to be a people-driven process, not a government-driven process. The government remains, and the PPP in particular, remains an ordinary stakeholder like everyone else. We will not superimpose our presence because we are a government and try to control the process. The people must determine the process, and the people must dominate the process. But we will set the infrastructure up to ensure that the process moves forward and moves forward in a manner that allows the people to be educated, importantly, so they understand the nature of the process, and then to have them produce the recommendations that will form the basis for those reforms.
Tied to electoral reform, it appeared in the news, I think last week, if I'm not mistaken, about electoral banditry. I believe it was your office that issued some statement that you wanted.
I was appearing on a radio program here, and I was asked about the very question and the type of reforms, and I went into greater details in some of the reforms. And one of the issues that I pointed to is that there is a marked absence of offenses in our electoral laws which are directed to election officials and election officers. Our legislation focuses the offense more on the voter. So you have persons being capable of being charged for impersonating a voter, voting twice, or voting, and you know that those so is offenses that are directed against the voter, but you don't see a corresponding series of offenses directed to the officials. And our experience in Guyana is that not only the voters are one problem, but you have the electoral officers and supervisors who have turned out to be the most devious miscreants, at least in the last election and in previous elections. So we have to confront that reality because we are peculiar in that regard. We all saw the fraud of Mingo and the attempted fraud by Lowenfield and their individual and respective cohorts. I mean, it was on display for the world to see. That will never happen again in Guyana. It will not.
Well, it could happen if measures are not put in place to prevent it from happening again. No one would have thought that such rigging would have taken place last March, given our history of election rigging between 1966 and 1992. But what is the current status of those matters involving Lowenfield, Mingo, Myers, and others?
26 charges have been filed against the various persons. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe they may be calling in the court tomorrow or Friday another calling. They are now in the process of moving towards the trial. It has been slow because we have had so many things happening, and the COVID pandemic obviously have slowed down litigation and the operations of the court across the board, especially the magistrates court.
And these individuals are still on their jobs. Now, in other countries, this would not have been possible. Can anything be done about this, or this has nothing to do with the government? This has to do with the Elections Commission.
Well, it has to do with the Elections Commission, but the Elections Commission is a constitutional public body that is governed by public law and is responsible to the public. It's funded by taxpayers' dollars. So the Elections Commission does not orbit in outer space by itself. It's part and parcel of the legal system of our country. It's part and parcel of the constitutional context and construct of our country. And therefore, they are bound by the laws of Guyana. And you are correct. In the normal course of things, when a charge is instituted, a person is asked to go on leave and is normally dismissed. But let us say that you want to give benefit of doubt and so on to these persons. But that happens when persons are charged and you allow the process to take its course. In this case, it's slightly different, and of course I may be criticized for saying this, but I don't need a magistrate to tell me what Lowenfield did and what Mingo did. You don't need a magistrate to tell you that. The Guyanese people saw it. They saw it on their own eyes, with their own eyes. I experienced it. I was a victim of it. So they may get off from the magistrate's court, but in my view, they can't be close to the electoral machinery ever again. I don't care which court exonerates them, if a court exonerates them at some point in time. The point I am making is that such conduct will not be tolerated by any professional outfit, by any outfit that binds itself to civilized rules and civilized conduct in a civilized country. Lowenfield defied the very commission. The commission gave Lowenfield directions 3 times, and he defied it, he tossed it aside, he perverted it, and the commission still needs some kind of encouragement to remove Lowenfield. Well, we may have to go on the streets again, but we will continue. We have a process internally, and we will continue to use that process in the commission itself to move. But I am saying, as a Guyanese, these are my views. I am entitled to say them. I mean, this is not thing that we can tolerate.
Just for clarity, go ahead, sorry.
The commission records itself convicts Lowenfield, convicts him, and convicts Mingo.
And that should be enough for him to be suspended or removed, or at least send him on leave, or actually not only him, but all who were involved in these skullduggery and attempts to rig the election. Any actions there expected from?
At a minimum, you are saying sending on leave and so on. At a minimum, they should be dismissed. That is the minimum.
Does the law?
These are employees of the commission, that perverted the process of the commission. And this is the commission. The commission was the victim here too.
Mm-hmm. But is the law clear on this matter, or does the law need tightening?
The law needs tightening in many respects. You see, the law was drawn several years ago, decades ago. That's the first thing. And The law was drafted with a certain sense of an innate and an inherent sense of human conduct on a reasonable basis.
In other words, one expected integrity.
In those areas. Now, this is not a murder law.
Yeah.
This is not a criminal law.
Mhm.
You understand? This
Yeah.
is a law to conduct a nation's elections.
Right.
Those who are chosen to man the machinery of those elections are presumptively people of integrity and honesty.
And so you will address
Proceeds upon that assumption. The drafters of the law proceeded upon that assumption. The law never recognized, never contemplated, never predicted, never conceived that you will have bandits of the caliber and notoriety of what we have seen here.
So we have to go on a break. So you are watching, you're listening to Globespan 24/7. And with us this evening is the distinguished gentleman, Attorney General, Senior Counsel of Guyana, Mr. Anil Nandlall. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Please stay tuned with us.
Logistics International, based in Trinidad, with representatives in Guyana, is pleased to announce its shipping services from Trinidad to Guyana. Logistics provides shipping services and has experienced personnel to handle all of your shipping needs from Trinidad to Guyana. Buy in Trinidad and let Logistics handle all of your shipping to Guyana, from small boxes to container sizes. Call Logistics in Trinidad at 1-868-336-8218 to handle all of your shipping needs, and they handle all sizes. Logistics International has been shipping for over 22 years to many Caribbean countries with reliability and dependability. Call 1-868-336-8218 in Trinidad. That's 1-868-336-8218. Or email at liclcargo@gmail.com. Globespan 24/7 continues its efforts to serve the communities. The platform provides for all sides to air their views and discuss solutions. Viewers in Guyana and across the world are participating in these discussions. Globespan's platform offers Guyanese an opportunity to express their concerns and discuss solutions in the political realm, thereby addressing the polarized situation. Discussions also include social ills such as alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicides that have been plaguing the people. The Globespan 24/7 platform connects the diaspora and the world with Guyana. So become a supporter of Globespan 24/7 today by clicking the badge icon on the lower right side of your screen. For only $10 a month, you will be a supporter of Globespan 24/7 initiative and have a badge displayed on your Facebook profile. Help us to continue to serve the communities. All From One Supplier is pleased to announce its online shipping for West Indian and American groceries. Order online at allfromonesupplier.com and with free shipping and deliveries to any part of the United States. Save time and energy to shop for all of your West Indian groceries from the safety of your home or office. We carry West Indian products like curry powders, meats and fish, dashing bush, pepper sauce, sodas, and your favorite snacks. All From One Supplier has it all. All From One Supplier fulfills and ships your order directly to you. So visit All From One Supplier today to start shopping, or call All From One Supplier at 718-551-3292 to handle all of your West Indian grocery needs. That's All From One Supplier, 718-551-3292. Free shipping, free deliveries, or curbside pickup from allfromonesupplier.com.
So welcome back, viewers, listeners. You are tuned into Globespan 24/7 program. I am your host, Moderator Vishnu Bisram. With us this evening is the distinguished Attorney General of Guyana, Senior Counsel, Mr. Anil Nandlall. This program is being brought to you by Mr. Nohar Singh, who is the owner and proprietor of Globespan 24/7, and he is ably assisted by technical operator Mr. Devin Bissoon. And once again, I'm Vishnu Bisram. Mr. Attorney General, sir, you know, the diaspora, the Guyanese diaspora is much larger abroad, of course, than the actual size of the Guyanese population. And people would want to return home, they would want to invest. They're also and to do that, they would be concerned about public safety, public health. I wonder what measures are being undertaken on those as well as other aspects of the economy that encourage people to come home, return home, invest.
You have asked a very, very important question. And a person's health is much more important than his wealth. So any sensible person will accord great priority to his or her health. Now, you may have recalled that in our budget, we extended a tax incentive to anyone who wishes to offer medical care. Any company, they don't have to pay company taxes, and they have a great number of tax concessions if you wish to open a company to offer medical services. What we are targeting there is private hospitals, specialized hospitals to be opened in Guyana, both by Guyanese as well as by foreign investors. You know, we had that specialty hospital that was coming from India, which the other side cut out of the budget during that period. Imagine today, we would have had perhaps the most modern specialty hospital in this part of the world. We are still pursuing that. But as I said, we are helping, offering a lot of incentives, including lands at a fair price and tax breaks and tax concessions for the establishment of those types of services. If you look at our last budget, our largest singular budgetary expenditure was in the area of public health. But we have to do much more. And that is why we are going to revamp the entire health sector, beginning with the legislation. Our Public Health Act, for example, is over 100 years old, completely anachronistic and out of sync with reality. And that's the Public Health Act that we are using right now for COVID. That's why so many regulations have to be passed at such frequent intervals, because it is simply ill-equipped to deal with the type of situation which we have on our hand. So I've already requested from the Minister of Health a list of legislation, and he has submitted to me a long list, including legislation that will permit transplants, body transplants, and so on. A whole list of legislation. So we have recognized that, and we are working to provide that. We are also encouraging in the education sector the establishment of offshore universities and medical schools. St. George's University in Grenada has now established itself firmly in the Western Hemisphere as one of the largest producers of medical doctors. I am told by somebody whom I consider to be an informed analyst that 1 in every 25 doctors in New York and New Jersey is a graduate from St. George's University. I have no reason to doubt that statistic, but it is a staggering assertion of reality and the contribution that that singular institution has made, not to mention how it would have impacted significantly and fundamentally on the economic equation of that country. We are trying to attract that in Guyana. And I know that the president is leading from the front in that regard. So you will hear, as part of the developmental agenda, as the year goes on, as 2021 unfolds, major investments being made in the medical sector. You asked about public security. That continues to be perhaps our greatest challenge. It will continue to be a work in progress, but perhaps the Home Affairs Minister should come on this program, and someone from the police force should come on this program to tell you the destruction that took place in the Guyana police force over the past 5 years, the politicization that took place. Remember, I had to take Joe Harmon to court for writing a letter on behalf of the president to direct the police commissioner to direct the police service commission to halt promotions of policemen. I went to the court and challenged that letter. That's the kind of directions that they were giving to the police service commission to halt police promotion. One of the most talented police officers in our country was exiled to a distant part of the country, removed from CID because he said in a commission of inquiry that he doesn't believe that the threat made against Mr. David Granger's president was a credible one. Remember, somebody text some message that they want to kill David Granger, and then a big commission of inquiry. And the man said from his investigations, I don't think that the allegation was a credible one. The man was transferred till to Timbuktu because of that. Mr. Silal Prasad was sent on leave by Mr. Ramjatan, a power that he doesn't have as a minister. So these transgressions took place, and structures that were in the police force were dismantled. Right now, there's a rebuilding going on in the force. So, but I don't want to go too deeply in it. I prefer that the security people speak about their challenges. And I want you, as you are in contact with Minister Ben, get him to come on this program. I'll let him speak for his sector, lest he accuse me of trespassing in his domain, which I am doing. So let me curtail that discussion right here.
So we are running out of time, and we are very grateful and thankful for the amount of time you have so generously agreed to appear on this program. But I was wondering if you could just give us a brief update on the state of this border controversy between Guyana and Venezuela.
Well, as you know, Vishnu, this is a century-old issue, and it was decidedly settled conclusively in 1899 when the two parties, Spain and Great Britain, went to an arbitration, agreed to the terms of the arbitration, and agreed to bind themselves by the outcome of the arbitration. And when the arbitral award said that the land of Essequibo belongs to Guyana, Venezuela said they're not accepting that. That the law doesn't permit that, international law. And that has been the position since. Every time, that followed us into independence. And every time there is economic activity of some substance, especially in the area of petroleum exploration and production, Venezuela resurrects this bogeyman claim. So they did it at one time. A Canadian company named Hunt Oil was coming here to explore. A US company, I think, was coming here to explore in the Essequibo in the 60s and in the 70s. They resurrected the bogeyman. ExxonMobil, part of the oil blocks that are out there, are in that area. So once again, they have resurrected this bogeyman. When President Chavez was in government, I recall distinctly him saying that this was a problem of the past and that we don't have to worry about it. Unfortunately, things have changed. But we wanted to bring this thing to an end some time ago, over 2 decades ago, and we began a process that is civilized and is accepted under international law, utilizing diplomatic protocols. We had various mechanisms and engagements. They all failed. We ended up at the United Nations, and the United Nations, with our concurrence, agreed to refer the matter to the ICJ. It is now at the ICJ. The ICJ is an international court to which independent sovereign nations can go and ventilate their disputes. As an incident of sovereignty, a country must submit to the jurisdiction of the court. Venezuela refused to submit to the jurisdiction of the court. So the court had to first interrogate the question of jurisdiction before it can proceed to hear and determine the merit of the case. And it looked at Venezuela's conduct over the years. You see, the law regards actions and place greater emphasis on actions than words. You can say what you want, but if your actions lead to a different conclusion, the law will go with your actions. So the law examined Venezuela's conduct over the past 50 years and concluded that they have submitted themselves to the jurisdiction of the court, and the court extended processes, which include the processes of the United Nations, etc. You see, one can't reprobate and approbate at the same time. The law doesn't permit that, even on the international stage. So the court ruled that it has jurisdiction, and the court apparently fixed a date for what we will call in local parlance, in municipal law, a case management conference to be held. A case management conference is simply where the parties go back to the court, and the court gives the parties directions. You are to put your submissions in time, in so and so time. You must file your evidence within so and so time. You must respond to this one, etc., etc. We saw that so many times in these political cases. That's all that the court is fixed for. Somehow that was misinterpreted by someone in Venezuela to mean that the court is going to rule, and that Venezuela did not get time to prepare its defense. And that caused Mr. Maduro to issue some reckless decree. And President Ali, of course, responded. And we have since denounced any type of that type of aggression. And we have invoked the support and solidarity of all of our neighbors and important regional organizations. The United States are with us. CARICOM has issued a powerful statement. Prime Minister Trudeau has issued a statement. And I'm sure that statements are going to come from areas like the Commonwealth and the United Nations and so on at a different stage. Because this is simply rogue conduct on the part of Venezuela. The court will obviously hear both sides and afford both sides all the facilities required to present their case in an adequate and comprehensive manner. But it is bullyism, it is roguism, and the world, as you know, more than perhaps I do, the world in the year 2021 will not tolerate such conduct from any country. So that is where we are. I'm sure more support will be galvanized in our corner in due course. But we have to hope for the best, and we hope that good sense prevails in Venezuela, and they submit themselves to the jurisdiction of the court and resume the court proceedings so that the matter can be effectively and effectually concluded with the degree of finality that is required.
We have gone beyond our time allotted. Any final words from you for our viewership, audience, listeners, globally and within Guyana?
Well, I want to say, Vishnu, that it has been an exhausting and exhaustive program. But it was totally enjoyable being with you and speaking with you. And I hope that I did not bore your viewers and listeners. I hope that they enjoyed our discourse. And I want to thank them for spending that amount of time with us. And once again, it will be a pleasure to be invited by you to share this platform with you.
Well, we thank you very much again for being very generous with your time. It really is an honor for me as well, and we will invite you again to appear on the program. So once again, viewers, listeners, you have been watching Globespan 24/7 program owned by Mr. Nohar Singh with Devin Bisoon as the technical operator. I am Vishnu Bisram, again, your host and moderator. Thank you so much for watching us and tuning in tonight. Have a pleasant evening and pleasant weekend ahead of tonight. Thank you again. Bye.